every once in a while you find like little tidbits in the New Testament about halachot, laws, that are really cool. But there's a whole passage in the New Testament in Acts 5 about Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Gamliel, right?
And as Christians know him as Gamaliel.
Right. So it's more like Gamliel, which literally means God is also with me, right? But so
and that's
Rabbi
a name
Gamliel,
that actually appears in the Torah. Gamliel. I think he's one of the princes of the tribes. Gamliel.
Right. And so Rabbi Gamliel appears in this passage, and it's a really great passage because Peter and the apostles are, just escaped from prison, and then they get caught, and the question is, are they going to get killed? And Rabban Gamliel gets up and says, hey, we've seen movements like this before, messianic movements. No big deal, everyone. Just let it go. Everyone just calm down. And he lets them go, and everyone kind of takes a deep breath. And if from the Christian side, that's all you know, that there was this Pharisee named Gamliel, right? But from the Jewish side, it's like, hey, Rabban Gamliel, he probably appears 1,000 times in the Mishna and Talmud, right? And he's in the very first Mishnah. He's in the opening one about when you recite the Shema. And on the night of Passover and the Seder, he is the most important rabbi. He says that if you do not fulfill these three things, you have not fulfilled your requirement for the Passover Seder. Right? And so Rabban Gamliel is extremely important. And from the Jewish point of view, it also makes a lot more sense. Oh, Rabban Gamliel, we've seen him a few times be very lenient with the other. There was this one time he was in this Roman bathhouse and it was dedicated to Aphrodite. And the students are like, Rabban Gamliel, how on earth could you sit in this bathhouse?
Let's put some perspective here. Yeah. So he's sitting, as they would say here in the South, naked in the bathhouse. And there's a statue of a naked woman in front of him, who is a goddess, who's worshipped as a goddess. Right. And they say, what are you doing, Rabbi? You're going to the bathhouse to stare at the naked woman. So what's his response?
His answer was, the bathhouse was made. That's the main thing. The Aphrodite's was just like the thing you add on top. I
think he said, she came into my bathhouse. I didn't come into hers. Isn't that what he says?
Something like that. Yeah.
Like I was here first. Like this is my country, and they put a pagan statue. It's my bathhouse.
Right.
Yeah.
And you see kind of lenient things, and it's interesting now that we have this. We can also kind of, with that perspective, kind of understand what was going through Rabban Gamliel's mindset in the book of Acts.
Wait. We got to get some more perspective here. So in rabbinical Judaism, you would never step foot into a house of idolatry. So when he goes in the bathhouse and they say, what are you doing? And he says, well, she's in my place. I'm not in hers. That is you can't underestimate what it's not just that she's naked. He's walked into the house of idolatry from the perspective of rabbinical Judaism, and he's saying, "Look, like you said, this isn't really a place of idolatry. It's a base of a bathhouse, which is the idolatry is encroached in there. It's secondary. So that really is a leniency from a rabbinical perspective."
Right. Yeah. And so, so we have all these things. Rabban Gamliel is, it's hard to emphasize how important a rabbi he is in the Mishnah and Talmud. He's definitely, I'd say like a Hall of Famer. There's no question. He's unbelievably important. And now it's kind of like, from the Jewish perspective, hey, he appears in the New Testament. He even, there's in Acts, and also later on, it says that Paul, who interestingly, claims to be the most religious Pharisee of all the Pharisees, right? So he actually studied with Gamliel. So these connections are very interesting. And so for those reasons, I actually call that the obvious connection, right?
Okay.
Those are the obvious. Hey, Gamliel, why aren't we both studying both, right? Why aren't more Jews?
It's the obvious connection of the New Testament with the Mishnah, you're saying.
Right, is that this one person appears in both, and that's really interesting. But it's only Gamliel. There's no one else.
So before you leave Gamliel, or Gamaliel, so it's actually interesting. So Paul says in Acts 22:3, "I am a Jew born in Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in the city, educated at the feet of Gamliel, according to the strict manner of the law of our fathers. And I always thought that was a really interesting phrase, educated at the feet of Gamliel. Can you say something about that? There's something in the Pirkei Avot that ties into that.
Yeah, there's a lot about Pirkei Avot about studying at the feet of the scholars,
right?
And you know, it was probably both literal
that's an expression. Well, it talks there also about the dust of their feet, because literally, right? You're sitting. You know, there probably wasn't a lot of chairs, and you know, they'd be in a crowded room, and they'd literally be at the guy's feet.
Right, and you know, if they were in a synagogue, there were only so many spaces on the wall where you could sit.
Yeah,
everyone else had to sit.
They were sitting on the floor.
We didn't have the same books like we do today. You know, you had to study mouth to mouth. You know, somebody would have to tell you and recite to you the Mishna and things like that. So definitely that ties in what Paul is saying. And you know, it's interesting. Elsewhere, Paul says that he does so many things that are, you know, rabbinic, but he obviously regrets that in some way and takes a new life.